Hi there. My name is Reverend Craig Peterson, and I'm the Associate Conference Minister of Congregational Development for the Central Atlantic Conference of the United Church of Christ. One of my duties is to staff the New Jersey Association. And when I arrived last November, one of the very first organizations I connected with here in New Jersey is what I think is one of the most important organizations as well, and that is the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders. So tonight we have with us two guests who will be sharing their experiences of the coalition. Our first guest will be Reverend Jack Johnson with the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders. And our other guest this evening is a local UCC pastor, retired, and longtime community activist for the peace and justice movements, and that is Reverend Rusty Eidmann Hicks. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Good to be here. I'm going to start this evening by asking Reverend Johnson, who's a coordinator with the program, if he might take just a few minutes, and for those of us who may not know much about the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders, just give us an overview of the history of the coalition and how it is that it came to be.
Sure. It was in 1967 when there was significant civil unrest and riots in the city of Newark that some 27 people were killed and hundreds were injured, and the city was devastated. At that time, the then Governor Richard Hughes has called together and put together a commission made up of corporate executives, made up of political leaders, made up of civic leaders, but also religious leaders, who came together to seek to address that issue and that moment in time. Including that was a subgroup of local clergy in the Newark area that came together. But out of that really became the birth, if you will, of the coalition itself. At that point, significant religious leaders at state level, what we often call grass top leaders. I always say the first group was a bunch of white guys with purple vests, but it really was significantly Christian and some Jewish representation. But that came together. They would meet semi-annually. In fact, they even took retreats, which was a way of bonding relationships, communal, collegial relationships for religious leaders in the state. They also met annually with the governor, and then met annually with the two United States senators. And so that was the kind of model that went on for some time. It was probably in around the area, I'd say in 2007, things started falling apart, partly because of lack of resources of leadership at that time. And I think there was a change going on in the context of denominational leadership, as well as a change in denominational priorities. And so that sort of lent itself to its demise. I'm semi-retired. I came back as my last appointment. I'm a United Methodist, was the executive director of the Massachusetts Council of Churches. And upon return, meeting with then Bishop Mark Beckwith of the Newark Diocese, he had lamented about the good old days, if you will, of this coalition. And so we discerned, well, let's see if we can pull that group together again. And so in 2007, I think probably about 2017, we brought together a group of clergy leadership, again, somewhat grass tops, if you will, although we were clear we were looking for diversity of leadership. And that changes in the context of the kind of leadership in the past that were denominational executives. In some of the faith traditions, they don't have those kinds of structures. So it was challenging in terms of discerning who was, quote unquote, a religious leader at the state level. But I must say, at this point in our coalition life, we have representation from Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, and Hindu faith communities.
Excellent. Thank you, Reverend Johnson, for that overview of the history. The other aspect of the coalition that's interesting to me is how each of us finds our own path or journey to connect with the coalition. So I wonder, Reverend Hicks, if you take a few moments and just explain to us how it is that you and your ministry was able to connect with the coalition.
Okay. My story is much more narrowly focused. I appreciate Jack's vision, and I'm a local pastor in Monmouth County. Actually, I was in a clergy group with Jack many years ago when he was at St. John's Methodist, and But anyway, in terms of getting to the coalition's meetings, I was asked by Reverend David Popham, Associate Conference Minister, to step in for him once when he was not able to make a meeting. And then this happened again several times. And when he left, I kept going. So, I've admired Jack and his ministry for many years, and it was good to associate with him and to meet new people. But I have to admit, I had a terrible imposter syndrome at first, feeling I was a lowly pastor sneaking in among the higher ups. I was fascinated and pulled in by the religious leaders involved in the coalition, their expertise, their involvement in social justice issues and concerns for the poor. I enjoyed, and I was inspired to hear superb speakers and presenters from statewide governments and many agencies. I appreciated ways that Jack and the coalition were able to leverage influence and power to affect statewide change. I also realized that we're really all just people of faith striving for core beliefs in compassion and equality and justice for all. So I ended up feeling quite welcome.
Thank you for that. And already out of the gates, I'm just kind of impressed and amazed at how the personal relationships in the work of justice bring us together and propel us forward. I hear in both of your stories. So Jack, Rusty sort of alluded to this a moment ago, but I think one sort of challenge or stereotype we have to work to overcome is this notion that the coalition exists or involves only those higher ups, the bishops or conference ministers, etc.
Right.
Could you talk with us for a moment about who it is that could qualify or be able to participate and benefit from the work?
Well, Rusty's situation is somewhat not unique in the context of the grass top religious leaders. Many of them are the denominational executives, have responsibility, some even outside the whole New Jersey area. And in terms of setting a calendar, that's always a challenge. And so it's been important that the denominations have been represented. And they've been represented well, particularly in the case of UCC by Rusty. And again, are people who in fact have, a commitment to the causes of social justice that we've been seeking to address, as well as they are the linking person with their denominational executive in terms of when they're not at the table. I was speaking today to Tim Graff, who's the Roman Catholic representative for the Newark Archdiocese, but Cardinal Tobin comes when he's here, but he's not going to be here in October because he's in Rome. So, there's the kind of things that we deal. We are just finishing a strategic plan. I'll speak more about that later, but that's going to be addressing this whole aspect of membership. Although this plan does still affirm the need for grass top leaders to come together. That's still very challenging to define that. What has happened in addition to the denominational executives, I would say, for example, from the Jewish community, and the president of our coalition, Rabbi Matthew Gertz, is the largest synagogue in the state. So that's an example of Jewish representation at its best, if you will. We also have perhaps I'd say 9 faith-based advocacy organizations whose leadership or advocates or employees, if you will, are members of the coalition also. So that's the kind of broad support we have. We also have some, I would say, pastors of distinguished churches, quote unquote, in New Jersey. Example, the Reverend Dr. Armstrong from Shiloh Baptist Church, which has been a critical church in the city, in the state, really. So those are the kinds of representatives that we've had. I know there's still an affirmation to have at least a collegial gathering of grass top leadership, but we're looking at a tiered membership, and I'll speak more to that in a moment.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So Rusty, local church pastors and religious leaders have so many different ways in which they can get involved in their community. I'm wondering if you could reflect on maybe some of the ways that you found that your association with the coalition helpful in both your personal ministry as well as your own life as well.
I'd say that being part of the Coalition for Religious Leaders has expanded my horizons, which is really important when you're in a little local parish. You need
Amen.
to widen your perspective. The many religious traditions represented by the coalition are a real reflection of the diversity that is New Jersey. Yep. And yet we so often live in our own little communities, our denominations and social bubbles. And the experience humbles me to realize the richness of the traditions on our region, and it inspires me to access interfaith networks to influence change. And that's one of the part of the beauty of it is networking with others, not only in the coalition, but outside of it. I've been part of an interfaith clergy group for all of my ministry in New Jersey, and this really comes in handy, like during Superstorm Sandy, when we needed to band together to share resources and expertise, and having a network, an interfaith network, it was really important. And this is true in other areas. I'm also involved in many environmental groups locally. The coalition showed me how this can be done on a larger scale. It showed me the political and moral power that religious congregations and associations wield for social change. I and my church were involved in various outreach ministries. We worked with soup kitchens and pantries and homeless projects and advocacy for affordable housing and the environment. And the coalition shows how we can cultivate this influence and access to lobby elected officials and statewide agencies for effective change in areas that my local congregation was concerned about. So it was great to see how this plays out on a much larger scale. Being involved with the coalition also pulled me out from my fairly affluent community to get into Newark and Trenton and out to communities of faith very different from my own. Meeting and conversing with leaders from many traditions opened my eyes to the integrity, strength, and depth of these communities of faith. So
Excellent.
It widened my perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Jack, so many organizations, certainly including our local churches and synagogues and mosques, have been faced with a real challenge as we continue this journey away from COVID. The organizations and the structures that we knew before it no longer are relevant into the world today in the same ways. You've already alluded to kind of some work on a strategic plan, but can you share with our listeners what the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders is doing to ensure that they're very relevant to today's world?
Yeah. Well, two things. One, we were never really organized. So we're finally getting a governance together, a corporation, and all those kinds of details and bylaws, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is we stand in a very interesting moment in time. First, faith communities are experiencing a decline in membership and membership engagement. Of course, COVID made, again, a major difference in the context of coming together. Although I must say, what became quote unquote a support group, our leadership team made up some 15 persons. To be in the COVID crisis, we gathered actually about a couple times a month, which was unusual, but it really formed a bond of relationships that's still continuing. Of course, the other issue is that we're facing in our culture is the internet and how that changes how we interact. And that is another issue about in-person meetings versus, not meeting, doing everything by Zoom. And then, of course, the whole aspect of our culture being so divided and so divisive at this moment that we feel this is a moment in time where religious leaders should come together more intentionally to share our values in helping to address the issue of the general welfare of the people of the state of New Jersey. Because of declining membership and engagement for some of our denominations, there's also a lack of resources. And part of our point is by coming together more intentionally, we can support one another at that level. What happened to us about a year ago, we decided we really needed to take a look at where we're headed in our future. And we were given a grant from what's called the Russell Berry Foundation for a strategic plan. We engaged some consultants from Pittsburgh, Common Cause Consultants, and they led us through a 5-month process of interviewing stakeholders as well as members, as well as different people, put together a 96-page report for us. And so we are now about to begin implementing this strategic plan for the future for the coalition. And of course, again, I think there's certain areas that we're focused on. We're still going to be very much engaged in addressing issues of social justice. We will have 4 work areas. Context one is just a membership development. And I need to speak to that we're looking at the idea of having what we call the tiered membership. So local congregations such as Rusty's could join, if their pastors or key lay people and their pastors say, we'd like to be a part of this community, they can become a part of the coalition, what we're calling a tiered membership. We're also looking at engaging somebody to do just clearly work in public policy. Well, at this point, we don't have the resources, but we have at the table today, there was 8 people that do just public policy work, the full time. So you can imagine the kind of clout that we have in the context of making a difference there. I think, the other question we're going to be dealing with is funding. We recognize it can't be funded totally by membership or denominational participation, but rather it will have to come from foundations, which are already engaged in that process of looking for funding for sustainability for the organization to expand. Again, it is a moment in time that we've really put a lot of energy, a lot of resources in planning a strategic plan for the future that I think would be much more inclusive. As Rusty, noted, the diversity of religions in this state is incredible. It really is. I think it's one of the most religiously diverse states in the country. And I think Middlesex County is, I heard some places, the 5th most religiously diverse state. And it was interesting. Saturday, I was a participant at the occasion of the celebration of Imam Hussein, who is the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. And it was a Muslim celebration. And my GPS got me confused, and I wound up at a Hindu temple rather than the Muslim mosque, but only 3 blocks apart. Passing by in that period too, the Ukrainian cultural center that is members of the group. Now, there's an example. I like to lift that up at the moment of the Ukrainian crisis, where there's a question of, what can we do in this moment? Their request was one of prayer. And we had an exceptional gathering of some 50 of the coalition members, but surrounding Archbishop Daniel, who's the Archbishop for the USA of Ukrainian Church, with prayers from the Jewish, Christians, Hindu, Sikh, and Jewish faith. It was just a very special moment. So those are the kind of things. We're building relationships, and I think that's important.
Yes.
We have the vision statement now. I guess I could share that briefly with you. It's our mission is the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders subscribes to a community-centered theology rooted in love that harnesses the power of interfaith collaboration and fellowship to become a chorus for justice across New Jersey. And our vision is that the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders will be a unifying force of interfaith religious leaders across New Jersey in order to build a just and merciful world. So that's what we're looking at.
Beautiful. And, I have to say, as someone who is new to New Jersey, I've been so impressed with how you've approached the strategic plan. It wasn't written by consultants behind closed doors or even a small leadership team, but the way you rolled it out, later or this past spring was in such a beautiful way to check in with the constituents and to make sure that it really did reflect their vision.
Right.
Beautiful. So oftentimes when we're dealing with entities or agencies, one of our concerns is about overlap. But what's been so beautiful in my experience with the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders is how they work so well in tandem with existing community groups. Now, Rusty, you're a part of here within the New Jersey Association of the United Church of Christ, the Social Justice and Witness Task Force. And I wonder if you might reflect on ways in which our task force might work in collaboration or conjunction, or ways you've even seen it between those organizations.
Yeah, our Social Justice Task Force, is comprised of things called communions. They're representatives, mainly UCC clergy from different local parishes, but each have an issue that they're concerned about. Those include housing and food insecurity, racial justice, LGBTQ issues, gender issues, the environment. And so, we have these social justice issues that we're wrestling with in our local communities and in our small group. But having the coalition there to network with and to see as role models, and to be able to hear wider issues on a statewide level from elected officials and other institutions is very important. I mean, recently Reverend Roberto Foy of our coalition came to one of the coalition meetings and immediately networked with about 5 people around how food insecurity issues, and he was extremely pleased to be able to come. So having access to the coalition allows and will allow our task force to hear from and learn from many different leaders about initiatives and legislation that bear on our own issues. We'll be able to contribute to lobbying efforts and to gain important perspectives on how to affect wider change. It allows us to network in our areas of concern. So I think it really dovetails beautifully with our work.
In our work, the next meeting in November will be hearing from 3 state leaders of organizations. They're not faith-based, but organizations that are engaged very much in the issues of public policy and the general welfare for the state. Both the supervising attorney from the ACLU, also the president for the president director of Fund for New Jersey, as well as the president of the New Jersey Public Policy Perspective. They're going to give us an overview of what they see from their organization's perspective as to what are the critical issues. From that, we have a team that we're just bringing that team together of a public policy team that will discern what are the 3 or 4 focuses that we're going to have in the next 2 or 3 years around legislation. And to that end, we are already planning a legislative breakfast in March, when we'll bring in prime sponsors as well as their staff to talk about issues, but also provide at that occasion opportunities for people to branch out to one area or another that they're concerned about and want to work together. So there'll be very much a focus around collaborative efforts, I must say that.
Thank you so much for that. So as you heard a couple times in our time together this evening, that the coalition is very connected, but also dependent on the support of local religious communities and individuals in those communities. And so we hope, as we head into the fall, including times like Giving Tuesday and other opportunities, that you will consider supporting, whether that as an individual or as a church or even a denominational expression, extending your support to the New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders. So as we wrap up tonight, I wanted to kind of give each of our guests the opportunity to speak to anything that we haven't yet addressed and make that final presentation and appeal for the coalition. So
we have a webpage. We have a webpage which people might want to turn to get more information about the coalition and membership and leadership. Our webpage is unique among all web pages. We don't ask for any money. Well, we're going to work on that. But the fact of the matter is that for people that are hearing us tonight or hearing this interview, might want to find out more information about the coalition. It's pretty well outlined on our webpage that gives its history, and I think they'd find that more informative too. Additional information, I should say.
And what is that website address?
It's just a Coalition of Religious Leaders, New Jersey Coalition of Religious Leaders.
Great. And is there any other aspect of the coalition, Jack, you'd like to lift up before I close this out with Rusty's comments?
Well, I think, again, we're open to people that would like to, that have interest, and we'll go back to this agenda of tiered membership. We're open to inviting everybody to our November 2nd meeting. There will be that day a commitment for the denominations and groups that have been a part of the coalition, but it would be a way for persons, if they would like to come to the meeting, they can hear that day what we're all about. And they would also hear our membership pitch that day and then return to their local congregation or to their faith group that might want to be a part of the coalition and follow through on the process. So I want to say it's an open invitation, but we need always a commitment and people be in touch with me.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Jack. And Rusty, how about you? Any closing comments or reflection you'd like to lift up?
Just briefly, I find it really refreshing to be in an interfaith environment with leaders from many different religious traditions. I actually majored in comparative religion in college.
Oh, okay.
And I myself meditate, and I'm interested in a variety of spiritual traditions, religious traditions. And one aspect that I love about the coalition is the warm welcome it gives to interfaith communities. Each community is celebrated as equal and valued and respected, and really respecting the traditions, and really raising the perspective of the leaders who are involved. I love hearing inspiring messages from historic religious traditions: Muslim, Jewish, Roman Catholic, Hindu, Sikh, and Protestant, many Protestants, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Mormon, and to appreciate their wellspring of wisdom and faith and their desire for peace and justice. And I also, was very inspired by the meeting at the Ukrainian Cultural Center, and meeting Archbishop Daniel, and the ways that we were able to experience, what he and his community are going through, but to show our support and to share in their sorrow and struggle. And that was a very powerful experience. And that's just one example of ways that the coalition brings the important issues of our day, issues of poverty and injustice and racism and gun violence and hatred, out into the light of the shared values of all of our religious traditions, to seek healing and hope. So thank you, Jack, for your leadership and for this coalition. So.
Well, I thank you, Rusty, not only for your engagement with the coalition, but for a long-term friendship. So I do appreciate that too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, friends, you've heard some of the amazing things that the coalition has done, and what Jack and Rusty have done in the support. So I would urge you, as we look ahead at the end of this year and the beginning of next, that you would find a way of not only connecting with the coalition, but extending your support as well. And so with that, I'll end our time together, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Craig, for inviting me.